We're live with Green Philosophy. This is Mark Abel, your host. Today I am having a conversation with Jessie Golem. She is an advocate for a universal income, and we're happy to have you with us today.
Thanks, it's good to be here.
How did you get started on this journey?
Well, I last year, actually it was 2017 now, there was a basic income pilot that was launched here in Ontario. And four cities were picked. One of those cities is my own city, Hamilton. And in order to qualify, you just had to make $30,000 a year or less, and then you could be eligible to be part of this experiment. So they selected 4,500 people. You had to go sign up, and I just thought, well, I'm like, I've heard about basic income. I'd read about it on Reddit and different stuff like that, but I was pretty indifferent to the idea. But I thought, well, like free money from the government sounds awesome. So I went to an information session. I signed up in December 2017, and I found out in February 2018 that I would be getting a basic income. So then from there, every month the government put $700 into my bank account every month, which was pretty cool. Yeah, so it was really awesome because it enabled me to focus entirely on building my business. I was a freelance photographer, and like having that little extra chunk of cash enabled me to have the time to be able to put into my business. And then it was really cool because when I had that time and I had that little buffer money, it enabled my business to grow. And in fact, I was actually making more money than it was before, because before I was locked into contract work, minimum wage jobs, and just sort of stuck in this place. And then with this basic income, I was finally out of that. However, there's an election. So the government that put in Kathleen Wynne's Liberal government was replaced by Doug Ford's Conservative government, and they made an election promise to not cancel the pilot, and then they broke that election promise. And this government seems to be doing that quite a bit, and doing it without any consequence, which I just think is terrible and disgusting. And I was furious when I heard about the cancellation. So, and just furious that somebody could just do that so easily without any consequence. So then I started taking pictures of the other basic income recipients and what they were using the money for. I got them to hold cardboard signs and write out in their own words, their own handwriting on the signs what they were using the money for. And so then I started this whole portrait series, and I got to meet people from all of the cities. I took about 70 portraits so far. It just seems to be this ongoing project that has taken on a tremendous life of its own. The photos have been seen in many major publications, CBC, Toronto Star, Huffington Post, BBC. They were in a news article in Kyoto, Japan. They've been in podcasts all over the world. So it's just kind of taken off and become a huge part of my life now. And I've traveled with those photos. I've exhibited them across Canada. I took them to New York and India last summer. And this whole thing just doesn't seem to be stopping. So it's been an amazing journey and really cool. And then also for me to sort of learn way more about basic income than I ever thought I could. I've met experts, like some of the world's leading experts on this topic. And now I'm kind of considered an expert, which I think is hilarious because I failed economics 101. But no, it's been a really, really cool journey. And the more I learn about this, the more I'm convinced that this is an important economic issue. We need economic reform. And I have this platform, and I've seen how this works and have this ability to advocate for it. So I consider it a personal duty to do so.
So you mentioned that having a buffer of about $700 a month allowed you to build your photography business. Can you tell me a bit more about some of the other people in the of the photography series? Some of those people you profiled. What were their experiences?
Yeah, There were quite a bit. You could receive up to $1,400 a month if you're a single person and you aren't working. So I was working, which is why I got 700. But I know some other people, like one of my good friends, Sarah. She was on the pilot, and actually, her and I were friends before all of this happened. And I didn't realize that she was receiving a basic income, but she used it. She was studying to be an osteopathic doctor. So she was going to school. Um, and then she was also working a bartending job at nighttime and just very, very busy. So just up all night at a bar, bartending, and then up early, early in the morning, like going to school, studying and working and everything. So having a basic income freed her up to be able to focus more exclusively on her studies, while still being able to pay the bills and still being able to live. And she's managed to graduate school. She runs her own practice now, and she's doing really great work in the community. And it wouldn't have been if it weren't for that basic income, that initial investment in her. I can think of many other stories. I have one friend, Alana, who has lived her entire life in poverty. She's never not lived in poverty. So she's been on various programs such as ODSP, Ontario Disability Support, or Ontario Works throughout her entire life. But then Gang Basic Income gave her that boost to sort of move into better housing. She was starting to look at school. She had bought herself a new winter coat for the very first time in her entire life, and she was planning on going to college, but then the pilot got canceled. So that was one of the devastating effects, is that people made plans, or they locked themselves into leases and moved into better houses, and then they paid tuition, and then all of a sudden this pilot is canceled, and now they can't afford those things anymore. So she had to cancel her plans and couldn't go to school. So we can also see the loss of investment, and sort of the devastating effect, not even on a person, like somebody personally, but also on a society economically, because one more educated, qualified person in the workforce is better than one person who's thrown back into poverty and has to go back onto these support programs.
So, can you tell me, just a little devil's advocate? It sounds as if this program is enormously effective. It enabled you to build your business. It enabled a medical student to graduate. It enabled somebody who lived their life in poverty to get a winter coat. Any horror stories or abuse of the funds?
I haven't heard any. Like, certainly there is that sort of assumption that, if you get free money from the government, you're going to sit on your ass and play video games all day, blah, blah, blah. I personally haven't seen that. And quite frankly, if people want to do that, then they can, and I don't really care. But it wouldn't, like, you wouldn't really live a great life. Like if I spent my $700 on a month just, sitting playing video games, then I'd be sitting in my parents' basement because I wouldn't be able to afford anything, eating ramen noodles. Like it's not really a glamorous life. And the kind of money you were getting wasn't a lot. It was a basic income. So overall, I saw people use it to, yeah, like do what I was doing. There was a business in Lindsay, like a health food store, and they used basic income to open up and focus on their business, because their family with 4 children. I also know some other people who they were living in a very dangerous, precarious living situation. They found themselves pregnant, and they also have another child, and they were in a neighborhood where there was like frequent amounts of violence and drug dealing and all kinds of stuff. Like it wasn't safe for their children to play outside, so they use basic income to move into better housing, and now they have a newborn and an 8-year-old, and those kids can play outside and they can take them to the park and it's safe. So like maybe there are those stories, and I don't doubt that they exist, but there are very few and far in between, compared to what I've seen overall. And scientifically, like there's actually been psychological studies that have been conducted. Ontario isn't the only basic income pilot. There's been numerous basic income pilots that have taken place all over the world. Finland, India, Kenya, California, Alaska, Manitoba, there's Brazil, there's basic income pilots that are happening. And so then there's always this question of, well, what's the relationship between getting money and working? Do people work more if they get money, or do they work less? And The answer across the board, across all these pilots in different economic places, in different countries, with different amounts of money, the answer was the same. People worked more. The correlation between work and a basic income was either the amount of work stayed the same or the amount of work increased. And I can link you to these studies. It's scientific fact.
So, what were some of the experiences in Finland?
What I've learned from Finland is they canceled the pilot prematurely as well. So there's still data that's waiting to come out. But one of the biggest outcomes that was seen in Finland was a huge improvement in mental health. That was one of the bigger outcomes. Was like a mental health improvement, looking for work and education. But the mental health was the biggest one, and that's what people constantly reported was massive improvement in mental health. And we also saw that in Ontario as well, that the majority, like even though the pilot was canceled, the researchers still conducted the surveys and still spoke to the participants. And again, it was like that improvement in mental health. Physical health improved as well. Hospital visits went down, crime went down. And that was the same in a pilot project that took place in Manitoba in 1970. Believe it or not, there was basic income pilots happening in the world in the 70s. In Manitoba, it was the same thing. They gave one town, the entire population, the town of basic income, and in that town, they saw that less kids were dropping out of school. The hospital, hospital visits were reduced greatly, and crime went down. And the overall economy of the town improved significantly.
So, you said they did a pilot back in the 70s, even.
Yes.
And so, this is not really a new idea.
No, actually, the idea is quite old. It dates back to one of the first or early mentions of it is philosopher Thomas More in the 1500s. Talked about having a basic income, mostly as like a response to, instead of punishing somebody for stealing bread because they need to eat, give them a basic income so they don't feel compelled to have to commit theft. So that was where he was coming from that. And in the 60s and 70s, it was very much, it was popular, believe it or not, in conservative circles. So like Milton Friedman, the economist, loved basic income and was a big proponent of it. And what they saw was that it was fiscally conservative. So they weren't thinking about from a social justice standpoint. They were thinking of, rather than having a huge patchwork of all these different support programs, welfare, food stamps, all these things, just consolidate it into one program, cut out the red tape, cut out the bureaucracy, and just give people money and trust that people know what they're doing with the money that they're giving and that they know what they need to survive.
So, how is it that universal basic income can reduce bureaucracy and consolidate what needs to be done administratively?
So there's a stigma in around these support programs, like such as OW or ODSP, Ontario Disability Support or Ontario Works. Those are the acronyms I'm referring to. Where like you always have to be accountable to a caseworker. You have to let them know every single amount of money that you get, where you're spending it on. If you get any more money, that the money that you get from the government is clawed back. And it's just a very, I would say, an undignified process. But then it's also like there's so much bureaucracy and red tape about having to hire all these caseworkers and having to manage all this administration. Just cut all of that out and just directly deposit cash. And also again, it goes back to that whole dignity thing and trusting that people know what they need to survive and don't need to be like constantly penalized or have their money scrutinized or anything like that, just because they're poor. It goes back to that dignity issue.
All right, so we're gonna wrap up the first part of this program. We if you want to take the last minute and just sum up some of the benefits.
Yeah, so like seeing the benefits in my own life and like other people's lives personally was I saw that it gave me that boost and gave me a freedom to pursue what I wanted to pursue and do what I wanted to do. And it was working. Like I said, I was making more money having a basic income and building my photography business than I was not having a basic income and locked into numerous jobs and sort of stuck in one place. So then I was able to contribute better economically. I was able to save money, pay off debt, do a lot of really good things. And also, I just see it as a necessity for the future of how society is going. There's a lot of talk about technology and automation, and we're seeing it already. Like if you go into a McDonald's, you can order your hamburger off of a kiosk. You go into a grocery store, you don't need to use a cashier. You can go to the self-serve checkout. In factories, like they're just